What's up, guys?
What up?
Why people in general wanted to move west. Alright, so people in general wanted to move west because it was a lot more civilized. There wasn't a lot of country boys out there, you know. We don't need these hicks out here in the west. We're doing real stuff. We making money, dude. We got
Taking
population.
the L. I mean,
we got
not
towns.
taking the L's.
We got opportunities. We got jobs on railroads for immigrants. All that cool stuff.
We have reservations. Reservations are an area of federal land that are reserved for the Indian tribes specifically. They used them because the federal officials had a promise to protect the Indian tribes, so they used them to keep them separated from each other. Go.
Oh. What were miners hoping to find? Were they successful? Defend your answer. Alright, so basically, miners were looking for gold and silver and all that cool stuff because they wanted to make money. And only a small amount of them, made it to making actual money. You might have made a couple $100, that was a lot in the time, but no one actually struck it rich. Or maybe a couple. But miners endured a lot of hard labor working and trying to find their gold and silver. They endured a lot of different conditions like heat and winter time and all that good stuff. And yup.
What's assimilation? Assimilation was the absorption of people into the dominant culture. This played a part in the Dawes Act, which was in 1887, which is a federal law distributing a lot of individual Indians rather than to tribes, thereby encouraging Indians to become assimilated. It harmed the American Indians by taking away their owning reservation lands as a group. Government began giving the land to individuals, and families were granted with plots of land to hold or to sell.
Alright, ranch for cattle. Alright, so basically in this time a lot of ranchers were raising cattle and stuff, and they were selling these cattle off, trying to make the money that way. And they used grass to let their cows graze and feed on it, and that's how they made money. They let their cattle graze, and having their cattle graze helped their cows grow, and a growing cow is an expensive cow.
You're like a record breaker. Anyway, so the opportunities and challenges with the settlers. So some opportunities were there was expansions of railroads which were carrying settlers to the plains. What railroad companies sold the land to the settlers that was granted by the government. The passage of 1862 to federal laws encouraged the settlement. Some challenges were building houses on the treeless plains, lacking lumber. Homesteaders dug holes in hills for shelter. The environment was also another challenge. The Great Plains were usually an arid climate, so it was more desert-like. But when they had moved in the 1870s or 1880s, they moved during a really wet time period, so it was way different than when it would have been on a normal basis.
Alright, vaqueros. So basically, vaqueros are essentially old Mexican cowboys, and these dudes started a lot of traditions for modern cowboys, cowboys that wore pointed boots and big straw hats and all that cool stuff. They started those traditions.
Basically, they look ridiculous.
Yes, ma'am. And they did a lot of rounding up cattle and branding them and then letting them free. And, yep.
So now we have the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act was an 1862 federal law that granted tracts of land called homesteads to the western settlers who agreed to work in the land and live on it for 5 years. Essentially, it provided 160 acres of land for the settlers from the west to live on. About 600,000 farmers claimed more than 80 million acres of land by the end of the 19th century. The Morrill Grant Act gave each state large tracts of public land for financing the establishment, to raise funds to build colleges, and the states sold the homesteads to the settlers.
Alright, the Chilsum Trail. So the Chilsum Trail was essentially a long trail that the ranchers used to drive their cattle from from San Antonio to Abilene. And these dudes would take weeks to drive their cattle up this trail to go sell them.
What are exodusters? African Americans who migrated from the South to the Great Plains following the Civil War. Why did some of the African Americans see the plains as the promised land? Some settlers were immigrants from Europe, often were lured by claims of railroad agents skilled at stretching the truth. A lot of former slaves, or aka Henry Adams and Benjamin Pap Singleton, encouraged the African Americans to build communities. Leaders helped organize a power store migration to Kansas and beyond. Migrants became known as exodusters, and it's a reference to Exodus, which is the second book of the Bible, and it recounts the Israelites' escape from Egypt, beginning their journey to the Promised Land.
Alright, what was life like for cowboys? Life for cowboys was very hardworking and grueling. These dudes suffered a lot of hard work, and the conditions were pretty bad. They had to ride around with their horses and stuff. They didn't really have anywhere to live. These dudes were just on the move, and they were always walking and all that stuff, and I'm sure finding food and water and all that was always a challenge.
Now we have populism, which was a political philosophy that the common person's interests over those of the wealthy people or the business interests. In 1867, Oliver Hudson Kelley started an educational and social organization to help the farmers. Grange helped farmers find their political voices, They channeled their anger into a protest movement based on populism. In the early 1870s, many states passed the Granger laws regulating the railroad rates. In 1886, Supreme Court ruled in case Wabash, St. Louis, and Pacific RR versus Illinois federal government, not the states, had the power regulating railroad rates since they're a form of interstate commerce.
Alright. What was it like working on what changes did the Transcontinental Railroad bring? The Transcontinental Railroad brought a lot of change for the people. It brought everyone together. It brought the East and West together. It helped spring up more towns everywhere because everyone could transport and get from place to place. It helped the economy because people were able to go out and buy things and sell things, etc.
The monetary policy, it's a government policy aimed at controlling the supply and value of a country's currency. The farmers took an action through other organizations as well. Greenback Party, formed in mid-1870s with plans to raise crop prices and relieve the farmers' debts. The goal was to increase the amount of greenbacks or paper money. Money flowing through the U.S. economy was controlled by monetary policy, the gold standard. Which brings me to the gold standard, a monetary policy requiring that every paper dollar in circulation be backed by dollars worth of gold in the U.S. Treasury. Greenbacks wanted the government to increase money supply by issuing greenbacks backed by both gold and silver. The greenbackers hoped the increasing would fuel inflation, general rise in prices, and that was including crop prices.
Alright, what was it like to work on the railroad? Working on the railroad was pretty hard for a lot of these guys, especially because a lot of these guys were immigrants, and when they had white workers working, they would make a lot of racial comments about them, and these dudes had to suffer through it. And they got paid lower wages, and they just didn't get the right treatment that they deserved. And they just stuck with it and put a lot of labor into it.
So, going back to the gold standard, I believe it was, the greenbacks definitely did not reach their goal, but they opened many Americans' eyes to the farmers' plight. The Populist Party, which was a political party founded in 1892 calling for policies to help working people, such as government ownership of railroads and coinage of silver. In 1892, populism broadened its appeal beyond farmers to include industrial workers. Money supply remained a major issue in 1890s. The opposing sides of the debate became as Silvertees and the Gold Bug. Republicans generally favored the gold standard. William Jennings Bryan won Democratic presidential nomination with moving speech condemning the gold standard. He said, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." The Populists endorsed Bryan. The Democrats lost the election. Populist Party soon fell from political scene. During the Populist Party, it made Americans rethink what government could and should do to promote opportunity for all. it says that the power of the government, aka in other words, the power of the people, should be expanded.
All right. What were the hardships for immigrants? So the hardships for immigrants working on the railroad were things already, like I've said, they didn't get a lot of respect. They were completely raced out. Like everyone would just make fun of them and make racial terms and slang, and they got paid lower wages, and their bosses just didn't pay any attention to them, essentially.
Is that it?
Well, I gotta do more. What about
I'm
you?
done.
Alright, why were railroads considered to be lifelines in the West? Railroads were considered to be lifelines in the West because they solved a lot of problems for the people, like transportation, selling things, transporting goods, all that good stuff. What cultures clashed on the Great Plains? Alright, what were the differences between Indians and new settlers? So, what were the difference between Indians and new settlers? Indians believed tribes or villages had rights to an area of land. However, the new settlers believed that land could not be owned, or no, Indians believed that land could not be owned, bought, or sold. And what were the difference between the nomadic tribes and the tribes in the east? Nomadic tribes had roamed the plains freely for centuries, and the east tribes had been conquered and removed from the plains, basically, from this other tribe. And so they hadn't been around for a bit. And the east tribes were a lot better farmers than the nomadic tribes. And that is all we have for you guys. So we will see y'all
Later.